Before the storm ever broke, the land already knew something was coming. The wind had that restless edge. The sky that sickly shade that made even old ranch hands uneasy. Out here, trouble never announced itself politely. It just arrived hard and unforgiving. The sky over the high wind plains looked bruised and swollen, the kind of gray that warned a person they had only, minutes before the world tore itself apart. A cold wind ripped across the open land, carrying dust, the sharp bite of wet earth, and the lonely rattle of loose fence wire singing its own nervous song. Mara Grayson leaned her weight into the sagging north gate, boots sinking into mud that was already stiffening beneath her soles. The wind lashed strands of sun-bleached brown hair across her face, stinging her eyes. Her fingers, cracked raw from work and winter air, clung to the warped wood until her knuckles went white. She shoved again. The gate answered with a low groan, stubborn as the land itself. Her breath shook in her chest. This ranch had once belonged to her husband, Owen. His dream. His pride. His entire life poured into weathered boards and tired soil. Now it felt like the place was slowly dying in her hands. Fences sagged under their own exhaustion. Cattle grew thinner with every drought-stricken week. Wells sometimes wheezed instead of pouring water, as if even the ground was tired of giving. Folks down in Dustfall liked to talk. They called her foolish for staying. Pride, they whispered. Stubbornness, a woman who didn't know when to quit. None of them understood that staying had nothing to do with pride. It was simply all she had left. The first cold drop struck her cheek, sharp and unmistakable. A warning, a promise. Mara straightened and lifted her gaze to the horizon. The entire western rim had gone black, a solid wall swallowing the sky. A storm was rolling in, one of those violent high-wind tempests that tore roofs from barns and yanked trees straight out of the earth. The cattle sensed it too. Their uneasy lowing rolled across the flats as they milled in tight, confused circles. "Move," Mara muttered, swinging a frayed rope against the flank of a skittish steer. "Get going. Corral's your only chance tonight." The wind's cry sharpened into a scream. Then the sky split open. Rain slammed down in a single punishing sheet, stinging her skin through her thin cotton dress. The world blurred into gray motion. Her boots sank deeper as mud grabbed at her soles, clinging like hands that refused to let go. Lightning cracked so close she felt the vibration in her bones. The herd panicked. Steers scattered like shadows, bolting in every direction. "No, no, no. Come back!" she shouted, but her voice vanished into the storm. A wall of water hit her, ripping heat from her body. Her hair plastered to her scalp. Her breath came in sharp, burning gasps. Within minutes, she knew she was losing. Losing the cattle. Losing the fight. Losing everything that remained of the life she'd clawed together since Owen died. Defeated, she turned toward the barn, shoulders slumped against the rain. That was when she saw it. A dark shape slumped against the lowest stretch of fence, motionless except for the violent trembling of the wire beneath it. At first she thought it was a calf, maybe a deer thrown hard by the wind. She squinted through the rain, wiping water from her eyes with the back of her hand. Not an animal, a man. Her gut tightened instantly. Trouble. Every instinct screamed the same warning. She took a step back, mud sucking at her heel as she turned toward the barn. She needed safety. Distance. Whatever this was, it wasn't hers to deal with. Then she saw the shadow spreading beneath the man's side. Thick and dark, not rainwater. Blood. Something inside her. Something worn down yet unyielding. Refused to let her walk away. Not on her land. Not in a storm strong enough to swallow the world whole. She cursed under her breath and forced her legs toward him. "Mister!" she shouted over the thunder. No answer. She nudged his shoulder with her boot. A low, broken groan slipped from him, raw and helpless. The sound cut straight through her defenses. He was alive, and that single truth sealed her fate. Mara dropped to her knees in the mud, hands shaking as she grabbed the collar of his soaked shirt. He was heavier than he looked, solid muscle beneath rain and grime. She braced a foot against the fence and dragged, him inch by agonizing inch away. From the wire, his boots carving deep trenches in the mud behind him. Wind hammered her. Rain filled her mouth and lungs. Twice she slipped, face hitting cold earth, grit on her tongue. Twice she forced herself back up, jaw set, breath tearing from her chest. At last she hauled him through the barn doors. The old structure groaned under the storm's weight but held barely. Mara collapsed beside him, chest burning, body shuddering. Rain battered the tin roof overhead, deafening, like being trapped inside a drum. She crawled to the lantern hanging from a beam. Her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the match. The flame sparked, flickered, then caught, spilling a weak pool of gold across the straw-strewn floor. The man's face emerged from shadow. Not old, late 20s maybe. Strong jaw, sun-darkened skin streaked with mud and blood. A few days' stubble shadowed his cheeks, dark hair plastered to his forehead. When his eyes cracked open, they were startlingly pale, like winter river water beneath ice. Wild eyes, weary eyes. The eyes of a man who knew danger intimately. Mara knelt beside him, breath still uneven. Her fingers found the wound high along his ribs. Torn flesh soaked crimson through his shirt. A gunshot. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't some traveler caught by bad weather. He was running from something. Owen would have told her to bar the doors, to leave him where he lay, to protect what little she had left. But she'd already dragged him through the storm. There was no turning back now. She tore strips from an old grain sack and cleaned the wound as best she could, hands forcing themselves steady. He hissed through clenched teeth but didn't cry out. "You should have left me," he rasped. Her jaw tightened. "Maybe I should have." He swallowed hard. "What's your name?" "Mara Grayson." She tied the bandage tight around his ribs. He blinked slowly. "Colt Mercer." The name settled heavy in the air. "That's supposed to mean something to me?" she said. He didn't answer. The silence did it for him. Rain hammered the barn. Lightning flared, throwing his face into sharp relief, pale eyes burning with pain and something darker. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Mara stood, lantern trembling in her grip. "There's no one riding in this storm," she said quietly. "You'll stay here tonight. In the morning, you go." She turned away, stepping back into the rain as the storm swallowed. The sound of his breathing behind her. Cold drops struck her face like stones. One truth settled heavy in her chest. She had just invited danger into the only safe place she had left. The storm raged through the night, a constant roar beating against the cabin walls. Mara sat near the hearth wrapped in a wool blanket, fire crackling weakly as she tried to warm her shaking hands. Her clothes still clung damp to her skin. The cold had settled deep into her bones. But it wasn't the storm keeping her awake. It was the man lying in her barn, Colt Mercer, his pale, haunted eyes, the jagged wound in his ribs. The way he'd said she should have left him, like death would have been easier. Thunder boomed again, rattling the walls. Then she heard it. A distant scream, raw and strangled. Her heart leapt. Colt. She was on her feet instantly, grabbing the iron poker by the hearth. Her boots slid as she burst through the cabin door and ran toward the barn, rain lashing her skin like a whip. She threw the doors open. Colt thrashed in the straw, sweat slicking his face, words spilling from him in fevered gasps. "No, leave him. Not the kid?" "Don't, Kane! Don't!" Mara froze. Kane. Every rancher knew the name Kane Wyatt, leader of the Red Creek Gang, men who rode with death in their saddlebags. A name spoken in hushed voices. Colt said it like a man trapped inside a nightmare. He wasn't just running. He was hiding from wolves. Colt cried out again, voice breaking with terror. Mara set the poker down and knelt beside him. "Colt," she whispered. "It's a dream. You're safe." His eyes fluttered, unfocused, trapped between fever and memory. "No, don't touch the boy. Don't." His breath hitched into a sob. Something cracked inside her. This wasn't the voice of a killer. It was the sound of a man drowning in guilt. She touched his shoulder. His eyes flew open, wild, feral for a heartbeat before recognition crept in. "Mara," he rasped. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," she lied. She saw him clearly then. Not a monster, not a threat. Just a man whose past had carved scars, deeper than any bullet. She rose and crossed to the small table, returning with a bowl of reheated stew. "Sit up," she said softly. "You need to eat." He tried. His hand shook so badly the bowl nearly slipped. Shame crossed his face. She sighed and lifted a spoon to his lips. He hesitated, pride battling hunger, then opened his mouth. Their eyes met, hers tired and stubborn, his pale and guarded. She fed him slowly, spoon by spoon, the storm roaring overhead. When he finished, she set the bowl aside and stepped back as if distance might calm her heart. "Rest," she murmured. He nodded and drifted into uneasy sleep. At dawn, the storm finally loosened its grip. Fog clung to the land like a shroud. Inside the barn, Colt lay pale, fever still burning. His breathing rattled. He needed a doctor. She knew it. But dustfall was a risk she couldn't afford. Too many eyes, too many memories, too many questions. Sheriff Hale especially. If he saw Colt, if he suspected anything, it would be a rope for both of them. Mara clenched her jaw and cleaned the wound again, hands brushing hot skin. A tremor ran through her. It had been 2 years since she'd touched another living soul. The warmth terrified her. Colt stirred. "You should go," he whispered. "Leave me before they come." "Who?" she asked. His eyes opened. Kane Wyatt, Jessup, the Red Creek boys. Fear prickled her skin. "You rode with them?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." She stepped back, anger flaring. "You brought outlaws here." "I didn't want to," he said hoarsely. "But you did." "I never crossed the line," he said. "They wanted me to kill a child." Her breath left her chest. "I told them no," he whispered. "So they shot me." Silence pressed down on them. "You're still trouble," she said quietly. "I know." Finally, she straightened. "You rest today. When the fever breaks, you move on." He nodded, though neither believed it. Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying the promise of riders. Danger was close. And for the first time in 2 years, Mara Grayson wasn't sure she wanted to face it alone. The fever finally broke late that afternoon, slipping away like a retreating tide. The barn filled with a soft amber light, as the last of the sun filtered through warped boards, dust motes floating like tiny sparks above the straw. Colt Mercer lay still on the pallet Mara had made for him, his breathing slower now, steadier, the hard edge of death finally easing back. When his eyes opened, they were clearer, still pale, still unsettling, but no longer lost to delirium. He pushed himself up on one elbow, jaw tightening as pain flared through his ribs. Mara stood across the barn, arms folded tight against her chest, trying to look indifferent, though she'd barely left his side since dawn. "You're awake," she said, sharper than she meant. "Seems that way," he murmured, voice rough like gravel dragged across stone. She studied him, taking in the dirt-streaked skin, the scar along his jaw, the exhaustion etched deep into his face, a man built to endure but worn thin by it. "You need rest," she said. He shook his head slowly. "I need to leave." "You can't even stand." "I'll manage." He swung his legs off the pallet. The moment he tried to put weight on them, they buckled. He hit the stall wall hard, breath ripping from his chest as his hand flew to his bandaged ribs. Mara was beside him instantly. "Sit down," she snapped, anger and fear tangling in her voice. His jaw set, pride and despair warring in his eyes. "I'm not dragging you into my mess." She laughed once, sharp and humorless. Too late for that. Their eyes locked, heat flashing between frustration and something neither wanted to acknowledge. "You talked in your sleep," she said suddenly, voice colder now. "Names, things I didn't want to hear." His expression shifted. The defiance drained away, replaced by a weary resignation. "You already know," he said hoarsely. "The Red Creek gang," she swallowed. "Kane Wyatt." He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, like a man finally letting go of a losing fight. "Yes." The barn felt smaller, the air heavier. "You were an outlaw," she said. His voice cracked. "Not anymore." She took a step back, instinctively guarding herself. "You expect me to believe that?" "No," he said quietly. "I expect you to believe I didn't want to be one." Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then he spoke again, softer, raw. "There was a family. A man, his wife, their boy. Maybe 5. His throat worked. Kane gave the order. "No witnesses." His hands trembled, not from pain now, but memory. The kid looked at me, no fear. "Just trust." His voice broke. I told him no. That was the line. Mara's chest tightened painfully. She saw the truth in him, felt it settle deep. "They shot me while I ran," he finished. "Left me in the dirt." He leaned back against the wall, eyes empty. That's who's coming. Fear rolled through her, cold and sharp. You should have let me die, he whispered. Stop saying that, she snapped, voice cracking. He looked at her then, really looked. At the woman who'd dragged him through mud and rain, fed him with shaking hands, sat awake listening to his nightmares. You saved me, he said. She turned away. Don't read into it. The flush creeping up her neck betrayed her. The next 2 days passed in uneasy confinement. The fields were too soft to ride. The wind stayed cruel. The cabin became a tight circle of shared space and unspoken tension. They bickered over nothing. You're cutting that wood wrong, Mara snapped one evening. I'm cutting it fine, Colt muttered, wincing as he lifted the axe. You'll split the handle, and you'll split my skull if you keep nagging, she glared. He smirked. Beneath the irritation, something dangerous simmered. In the evenings, they spoke less, thought more. Mara caught herself watching the firelight trace the lines of his face. Colt found his eyes drifting to the strength in her hands, the curve of her shoulder. He told himself not to. Want. He failed. On the third night, the storm returned with savage force. Wind screamed past the cabin, lightning ripping the sky apart. Mara lay awake, heart restless. She heard Colt pacing outside, uneven steps of a man wrestling ghosts. She pushed open the door and stepped into the rain. Colt! She shouted. He turned, drenched, shoulders hunched. Go inside, he yelled. I don't want you mixed up in this. You already mixed me up, she shot back. He looked away. I ruin everything. You didn't ruin me? Lightning flared, illuminating the torment in his eyes. I should have died, he said. Easier for you. Her chest ached. Easier isn't right. You think I'm good? He shouted. You don't know me. Then show me, she screamed back. She stepped closer. He retreated, fear of himself plain on his face. Why did you save me? He whispered. Because I'm tired of being alone, she breathed. Lightning turned the world white. He grabbed her wrist, shaking. You don't know what you're asking? Then tell me. Rain streaked down her face, tears with it. Don't be gentle, she whispered. The last of his restraint shattered. He pulled her to him, kissed her like a man drowning. Desperate and hungry, the storm swallowing them whole. Dawn came slow and uncertain. Inside the cabin, silence pressed heavy. Colt sat near the hearth, bandaged ribs rising and falling. Mara stood by the fire, arms wrapped tight around herself. Last night hung between them, fragile and unspoken. You didn't have to come out there, he said softly. You didn't need to be hurting alone, she replied. He swallowed. That wasn't fair to you. She met his gaze. You think I regret it? He looked away. I don't get to have something good. She stepped closer. Let me decide. Before he could answer, hoofbeats cut through the quiet. Colt stiffened. Sheriff Hale, he whispered. Fear slammed into her. She dragged him toward the cellar. He resisted. I won't hide while you lie. You will, she said fiercely. He gave in as the knock came. Hale stepped inside, eyes sharp. You alone? Yes. His gaze lingered on the rug. Storms loosen cellar doors, he murmured. Her heart pounded. Finally, he stepped back. If you're hiding an outlaw, he warned softly, you'll hang with him. When he left, her knees gave out. Colt climbed out, furious and shaken. You lied for me. What choice did I have? You'll lose everything. Everything was already slipping away, she whispered. You're the only thing that's felt alive since Owen died. The truth struck them both. Then hoofbeats thundered again. 3 riders. Colt went pale. Get your rifle, he said. They're here for me. Mara lifted the gun, steady despite terror. As the riders closed in, something inside her settled hard and clear. Whatever came next, she would not face it alone. The riders came hard out of the thinning fog, dark shapes cutting across the soaked earth with purpose that set every nerve on edge. Even before they drew close, Colt recognized the way they sat their saddles. Loose and confident, men who believed the land bent for them. Kane Wyatt's men. His pulse thundered, not for himself, but for the woman standing beside him with a rifle braced against her shoulder. Knuckles white, jaw set, Mara, he said under his breath. Listen to me. If this turns bad, you run. She didn't look at him. Not leaving. You have to, he insisted. They'll kill you. She stepped closer, voice low and steady. They'd kill me whether you were here or not. I'm done running from life. He stared at her, something raw breaking open in his chest. Stubborn, fierce, alive, in a way he'd forgotten people could be. He wanted to say more, wanted to touch her, but the hoofbeats thundered louder, shaking the ground beneath their boots. Too late. The three riders slowed as they entered the yard, horses snorting, mud splashing beneath iron shoes. The leader shoved his hat back, scar cutting white across his cheek, his grin sharp and joyless. Jessup, Kane Wyatt's right hand. Well now, Jessup drawled, eyes flicking between them. Ain't this something? Colt Mercer still breathing, and hiding behind a woman's skirts. Colt stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Jessup and Mara. Leave her out of it. Jessup laughed, cold and thin. Can't do that. She's seen you. That makes her part of our business. Mara lifted the rifle, heart hammering. I'm not afraid of you. Jessup tilted his head, amused. You should be, sweetheart. The second rider shifted in his saddle, restless. Let's just take Colt and go. Kane's waiting. Not happening, Colt said flatly. Jessup's grin widened. Kane figured you'd say that. So he sent an offer. Colt didn't blink. Not interested? Jessup leaned forward. You come back. Finish what you wouldn't. Woman walks free. Mara stiffened. Colt felt the blood drain from his face. No, he said instantly. Jessup's brow lifted. So you'd rather she dies? Colt moved without thinking, stepping fully in front of her. You touch her, he growled, and I'll bury every one of you. Jessup smiled like a man admiring a dangerous animal. There it is, the Mercer fire. Tell Kane his offer's worthless, Colt said. Jessup sighed, exaggerated and bored. Shame. Guess we do this the hard way. He raised his rifle. Colt shoved Mara back toward the cabin. Get down. Gunfire shattered the morning. Shots cracked sharp and violent, echoing across the plains. Mara dove behind a water barrel as splinters flew from the cabin wall. The smell of gunpowder mixed with wet earth, choking and hot. Colt fired back from behind the chopping block. Each shot measured despite the pain tearing through his ribs. Bullets chewed into the ground around him. Mara, he shouted. Stay low. She couldn't answer. Fear locked her throat. Then she saw him stagger, still firing, still standing between her and death. Something hardened inside her. She steadied the rifle, drew a breath, aimed, and pulled the trigger. One rider jerked sideways, tumbling from his horse with a cry. Colt glanced toward her, shock and fierce pride flashing in his eyes. Jessup swore. Enough of this. He spurred his horse straight at Colt. Colt fired and missed, reloaded with shaking fingers. Jessup lifted his rifle, sighting Colt's chest. No! Mara screamed, breaking cover. She ran, boots slipping in mud. Jessup's aim wavered for a heartbeat. It was enough. Colt fired. The shot hit Jessup square in the chest. He toppled backward, hitting the ground hard, rifle falling uselessly from his hand. The last rider didn't hesitate. He kicked his horse and bolted, vanishing into the wet horizon. Colt didn't chase him. The message would travel faster than any bullet. Silence rushed in, thick and unreal. Wind whispered through broken fence boards. Smoke drifted from hot barrels. Mara stood frozen, chest heaving. Colt stumbled toward her, his gun slipping from his fingers into the mud. Mara, he rasped. Are you hurt? She shook her head, blinking hard. You're bleeding. So are you. She looked down, surprised to see blood soaking her sleeve, a shallow graze she hadn't felt. Colt reached out, fingers trembling, and brushed her cheek. Gentle. You saved my life, he whispered. You saved mine first. Their foreheads nearly touched, breaths mingling. I can't stay, Colt said suddenly, voice thick. Kane'll come himself. If you leave, she whispered, I won't forgive you. Tears filled his eyes. If he catches me, he'll kill you slow. I can't let that happen. I dragged you out of that storm, she said fiercely. I won't watch you walk away. He cupped her face. Mara Grayson, I love you. That's why I have to. Her breath hitched. I love you too. He kissed her then, soft and shaking, a kiss full of fear and hope and goodbye. He saddled Jessup's horse, blood still seeping at his side. He looked back at her like she was the only light left in the world. Then he rode into the gray morning, mist swallowing him whole. Mara stood long after he was gone, wind tugging at her dress, the land quiet except for her heartbeat. She didn't know when he'd return. She didn't know what waited ahead. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Colt Mercer hadn't left her heart, and he never would. The ranch settled into an uneasy quiet after Colt disappeared into the mist, the kind of stillness that rang louder than gunfire. The wind moved soft now, almost cautious, tugging at the loose boards and broken wire as if the land itself were holding its breath. Mara Grayson stood in the yard long after the hoofbeats faded, her fingers numb around the rifle stock, her chest aching with every shallow breath. The place looked the same as it always had, muddy ground, sagging fences, cattle huddled in the distance, but something essential had shifted. She felt it in her bones. He was gone, but he hadn't left her. Not really. The days that followed blurred together, measured by chores done on instinct, and nights spent staring at the ceiling, listening for sounds that might never come. Mara repaired what she could, tended the cattle, and kept her rifle within reach. Sheriff Hale didn't return, but his warning lingered like a bruise. She replayed his visit over and over, the way his eyes had lingered, the way his voice had softened when he spoke of ropes and consequences. She knew he'd be back. Trouble never stayed gone for long. Nights were the worst. The wind carried memories instead of storms now. Colt's voice, low and rough, his pale eyes when he said her name, the way he'd kissed her like it was the last good thing he'd ever touch. She told herself she'd been foolish, lonely, starved for warmth. But the lie never held. Weeks passed. The land dried. The cattle grew steadier. And then one evening, as the sun bled orange across the plains, she heard it, a single horse. Her heart slammed so hard she tasted blood. She stepped out onto the porch, hand hovering near the rifle. The rider emerged slowly from the haze, shoulders slumped, moving like a man who'd ridden through hell and back. When he drew close enough for her to see his face, the breath left her body in a rush that almost dropped her to her knees. Colt. He slid from the saddle awkwardly, favoring his side. But he was alive, thinner, harder. His eyes locked onto hers like he'd been holding that image in his head the entire ride. "You came back," she whispered, afraid to move, afraid he might vanish. "Told you I would," he said, voice hoarse. She crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and slammed into his chest, arms wrapping around him like she was afraid the world might try to steal him again. He hissed softly but held her tight, burying his face in her hair. "Kane?" she asked against his shoulder. He shook his head. "Dead. Turned on the wrong man. Took most of Red Creek with him." Relief buckled her knees. She pulled back just enough to look at him. "You're hurt." He gave a tired smile. "Nothing you can't fix." She laughed then, a broken sound edged with tears, and dragged him toward the cabin. That night, with the fire low and the wind finally kind, Mara Grayson let herself believe in something she hadn't allowed in years. Not safety, not certainty, but a future that didn't feel empty. Outside, the high wind plains stretched wide and unforgiving as ever. But inside the cabin there was warmth, shared breath, and the quiet. Understanding of 2 souls, who had survived the storm and chosen to stand their ground.